Welcome to the AI Tools Conversation podcast, where two hosts break down everything AI in plain English, one tool at a time. Let's get into it.
Most AI tools answer your questions. OpenClaw actually does your work. And the craziest part, the software making this a reality was built by an Austrian developer named Peter Steinberger in just 60 minutes.
Wait, a single hour?
A single hour for the initial commit, yeah.
That is wild. I mean, fast forward a few months to April 2026, it's sitting at over 350,600 GitHub stars and 70,000 forks.
Right.
Steinberger gets scooped up by OpenAI, and NVIDIA's CEO is out there publicly calling it the next ChatGPT.
Exactly. So today we are pulling directly from our source notes to do a deep dive into exactly what OpenClaw is.
Yeah.
We're looking at the actual mechanics of how it bridges the gap between generating text and, actually executing commands. And crucially, whether giving an automated script route access to your digital life is just a massive disaster waiting to happen.
Honestly, seeing the hype cycle hit overdrive again makes me inherently skeptical. I mean, we see a new tool trending weekly, right?
We really do.
If this is just another wrapper around GPT-4, the excitement just doesn't map to the reality. What is fundamentally different here beneath the surface?
Actually, the sources pinpoint the exact difference, and it comes down to a specific mechanism called an agentic harness.
An agentic harness.
Yeah. Up until now, we've essentially been dealing with brains in jars.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. An LLM is incredibly smart, but it has no hands. It can generate a brilliant Python script or a perfectly formatted email to reschedule a meeting, but you, the human, still have to copy-paste it, open your terminal, or hit send.
Right. The friction hasn't been the intelligence of the model. It's been the context switching. Every time the AI produces an output, you have to step in and act as the execution layer.
Yes, and the agentic harness replaces that human execution layer. It acts as both a translation engine and a nervous system.
How so?
Well, when OpenClaw receives an intent from you, it doesn't just ask the LLM for a text response. It formats a prompt that forces the LLM to output a structured JSON payload or an executable command.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Then OpenClaw takes that payload, authenticates it, and fires it at the appropriate API, whether that's Google Calendar, your local file system, or Slack.
So the harness is parsing the raw output and pushing it through actual authenticated endpoints. That completely explains how it bypasses the manual labor.
Exactly.
But wait, what happens if the API call fails? Like if Google Calendar returns a 404 error or a scheduling conflict, a standard automation script just crashes at that point.
And that is where the multi-term capability of the harness kicks in. If OpenClaw hits an error, it feeds the error log right back into the LLM.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it says, the 3 p.m. slot is blocked. Here is the JSON error. The LLM processes that, generates a new plan, maybe finding a 4 p.m. slot instead, and passes the new payload back to the harness to try again.
It self-corrects.
Yep.
That is a massive leap from a basic Zapier integration. But, I mean, interacting with the terminal window to trigger all this isn't exactly frictionless either.
Yeah.
How are users actually deploying this in their day-to-day?
They aren't using a terminal at all once it's set up. The brilliance of the deployment is that OpenClaw binds natively to messaging protocols.
Like texting.
Exactly. You link it to a WhatsApp business number or a Telegram bot or a Discord server. It literally just becomes a contact in your phone.
Which completely shifts the user experience. You're out grabbing a coffee, you text your OpenClaw agent, cancel my 3 p.m., reschedule for Friday, and draft the client an apology.
Right.
And the harness translates that natural language into the sequence of API calls, checking availability, modifying the calendar object, drafting the Gmail draft, and hitting the send endpoint. You just put your phone back in your pocket.
You do absolutely nothing else. You are still in the loop because you initiated the command, but the heavy lifting is completely offloaded.
I mean, having a localized system constantly pinging cloud APIs, running multi-turn error corrections, parsing your calendar, that sounds computationally exhausting.
It does.
And honestly, financially dangerous if you're paying per token. We know how massive the data centers are that run these models.
Well, let's deconstruct the resource breakdown because the word free gets thrown around a lot here. The software itself, OpenClaw, is 100% open source.
Okay.
The orchestration layer is free. But as we said, it's just the nervous system. It still needs a brain. You can plug it into OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepSeek, but every time it thinks, every time it corrects an error, you are paying for those API calls.
Right, and if it's pulling your inbox every 5 minutes, reading threads, classifying them, those token costs are going to scale exponentially. You could easily rack up a massive AWS-style bill just letting it monitor your Slack channels.
Exactly. If you scale heavy automation on GPT-4, it will absolutely cost you.
Right.
But the developers anticipated this, which is why the most serious implementations are completely decoupled from cloud APIs.
Decoupled how?
Users are pointing OpenClaw at local open source models, like quantized versions of Llama 3 running entirely on their own hardware.
Waiting an LLM locally while it manages a multi-turn agentic harness, that usually requires a massive GPU rig. We're talking thousands of dollars in hardware just to run the brain.
You would think so, but the sources highlight an astonishing spec requirement here. Because OpenClaw is just a lightweight orchestration layer written in Rust,
Okay.
and because local models can now be highly compressed or quantized to run on basic CPUs, the system can technically run on a machine with just 4 gigabytes of RAM.
4 gigs of RAM. Are you serious?
Yeah.
A base model web browser uses more memory than that, just keeping a few tabs open.
I know, exactly. A 5-year-old laptop out of your closet can run this software. You don't need a server farm. People are literally wiping old machines, installing Linux, and letting OpenClaw run in the corner of their room.
Wow.
Which is necessary, by the way, because if the host machine goes to sleep, the agent goes offline, it needs to be an always-on device.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right? It essentially turns a piece of e-waste into a dedicated, localized server for your personal automation. No subscription fees, no token costs, just the electricity to keep the laptop running.
Right. 4 gigabytes of RAM means you don't need a corporate IT budget. A freelancer can run this. In fact, look at Marcus from our notes. He's a perfect real-world example of what this looks like in practice.
Let's hear it.
So Marcus is a 29-year-old freelance content strategist based in Portugal. He manages social media accounts for 4 different brands, runs a newsletter, and does podcast research.
Sounds like he's juggling a massive amount of context switching.
He is. He's great at the strategic part of his job, but he was drowning in the administrative quicksand. You know, checking if brands replied to comments, manually updating Notion boards, downloading assets from Google Drive, uploading them to client folders.
It's the execution-heavy work that catches so many independent workers. It doesn't take genius-level creativity, but it eats up massive chunks of your day moving digital paper around.
For Marcus, it was eating 3 to 4 hours out of every single day. So he decides to spend a single weekend setting up OpenClaw on an old ThinkPad. He authenticates it with his Gmail, his Task Manager API, and points it to a local model. And the very first workflow he builds is an automated morning briefing.
If we look at the mechanics of that briefing, it's a great example of how multi-agent coordination actually functions.
Exactly.
At 8 a.m., OpenClaw runs a cron job. It hits the Gmail API, pulls the last 24 hours of unread mail, and parses the text. But it doesn't just summarize them blindly, right?
Right. It cross-references the sender with Marcus's active client list in his database, ranks them by urgency based on sentiment analysis, and then pushes a clean formatted digest via the WhatsApp API.
So instead of opening his laptop and getting hit with a wall of 60 chaotic, unread threads, he wakes up to a single prioritized message on his phone telling him what actually matters.
Yep. That single automation saved him 45 minutes every morning. Instantly. Then he scaled it up to active commands. He'd text, mark the Instagram content for client B as done and move it to the approved folder.
And instead of Marcus opening his project manager, finding the specific card, clicking done, then opening Google Drive, finding the file, and dragging it to a new directory,
So it does it.
It translates that intent and executes the API calls across both platforms in milliseconds.
Exactly. After a month of tweaking these workflows, Marcus tracked his time. He'd reclaimed roughly 2 hours per workday. He didn't have to hire a virtual assistant, and he didn't have to pay a massive monthly fee to an enterprise automation platform like Zapier or Make.
Reclaiming 10 hours a week is life-changing for a freelancer. But honestly, this brings up the inevitable anxiety surrounding automation. If an open-source script can handle cross-platform file management and client communications natively, what happens to the market for virtual assistants? Is this software coming for those jobs?
It's a valid fear, but the sources draw a very clear boundary here. OpenClaw is phenomenal at deterministic, rule-based execution. Like, if the specific email comes in, update this specific database row. But it falls apart when you introduce ambiguity, complex stakeholder management, or true creative decision-making.
Yeah, an agent can push an invoice to an approved folder, but it can't jump on a Zoom call to intuitively de-escalate a frustrated client who feels like they aren't being heard. It optimizes the operational backend.
Yes, it just makes the freelancer faster. It takes the robotic work out of the day so the human can focus on the high-leverage interpersonal work.
I mean, I see the massive value in that, but I need to shift gears here because my security anxiety is spiking right now.
Oh, totally. Let's get into it.
You are granting a localized script one that was initially built in an hour-full API access to your inbox, your private calendar, your project files, and potentially your local operating system. If this thing is autonomously deciding how to execute actions, that is a terrifying attack surface.
You know, you are echoing the exact alarm bells being sounded by the cybersecurity community right now. We have two wildly divergent camps in the source notes. Yeah. On one side, the freelancers and developers are evangelizing this as the great equalizer. They are building deployment guides, sharing use cases. It's a thriving open source community.
An InfoSec community is looking at an orchestration layer that can write, modify, and delete files autonomously, and they're seeing a ticking time bomb.
Exactly, and it's not theoretical. The sources document several instances of agents going rogue due to poor parameter constraints. There was a report of a user who set up a workflow to clean up and organize their old emails.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, they gave OpenClaw access to their Gmail API, but their prompt lacked strict negative constraints.
Let me guess. The LLM decided the most efficient way to clean up a cluttered directory was just to empty the trash and delete everything.
Wiped out entirely. Years of correspondence gone in less than 60 seconds, all because the AI optimized for cleanliness rather than archival retention.
Oh my God.
And if it has local file system access, you aren't just risking an inbox. It could recursively delete financial records or accidentally overwrite a core client project file.
This is why one of the core maintainers of the OpenClaw repository released that stark warning in our notes. They explicitly stated that if you don't understand command line interfaces and basic system permissions, this software is simply too dangerous for casual use right now.
It really is.
It is industrial machinery without the safety guards installed.
Which means if you are going to deploy this, you have to establish rigorous guardrails. The sources outline a strict security posture for anyone attempting this.
Let's hear the rules.
Rule number 1. Start with the official OpenClaw GitHub documentation. The ecosystem is moving so fast that third-party YouTube tutorials are either deprecated or, worse, steering you toward vulnerable configurations.
Go straight to the source. Makes sense. The second rule is arguably the most critical for system integrity. You absolutely cannot run this agent as root or with administrator privileges.
Actually, the best practice is to sandbox it entirely. You create a separate, dedicated, non-privileged user account on that laptop specifically for the agent. If the agent hallucinates a command to delete a core directory, it will just hit a permission-denied error rather than formatting your entire hard drive.
Contain the blast radius. And that logic applies to how you expand its capabilities too. OpenClaw uses a modular skills system to integrate with new apps, almost like browser extensions. But since anyone can publish a skill to the community, the threat of supply chain attacks is massive.
Right. The sources note that security researchers have already isolated malicious third-party skills that were quietly exfiltrating API keys and session tokens.
Wow.
You install a seemingly helpful skill to connect OpenClaw to your Notion workspace, and suddenly a bad actor has your auth tokens. You have to restrict the agent exclusively to verified, audited integrations.
So you invite the assistant in, and it hands your passwords directly to a hacker? That is a huge risk.
Yeah.
And beyond the technical sandboxing, there's a behavioral guardrail. You don't hand over the keys to the entire business on day one.
Exactly.
You implement it incrementally.
Yeah.
You set up Marcus's morning briefing, and you let it run in read-only mode for a full week. You audit its logs. You ensure the parsing logic actually works before you ever grant it write access to modify a calendar or send a message.
It requires a fundamental shift in how we approach our digital infrastructure. We're moving from a paradigm of consultation, asking the oracle for a template, to a paradigm of delegation, where we manage asynchronous digital workers. And as long as you respect the security requirements, the barrier to entry is virtually non-existent.
Yeah.
A spare laptop, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and a weekend of configuration can drastically reduce the operational friction of your daily work.
It's the difference between asking for advice and getting the work done. The bottleneck is no longer intelligence. It is purely your ability to architect the execution layer securely.
Exactly. But here's a thought to leave you with, something that builds on this entire shift. If OpenClaw allows you to perfectly automate and offload your administrative bottlenecks, what happens when the people you work with start doing the exact same thing? We are rapidly approaching a reality where your AI agent is automatically negotiating deadlines, pushing back on scope creep, and scheduling meetings directly with your client's AI agent.
Agents talking to agents.
Exactly. As our tools stop talking to us and start talking exclusively to each other, we have to wonder, at what point do we just become the slow, organic bottlenecks in our own businesses?
That is a wild thought to leave on.
Something to think about. See you next time.
That's a wrap on today's episode. If this helped you understand AI a little better, follow the channel, drop a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. New episodes every week. We'll see you in the next one.